Okay, we are live May 22nd, 2025. I moved over to Streamlabs. That should solve the issue. We've had a number of technical glitches, and I believe we have corrected the situation. So everything is going to go ahead and move forward. Phones are on 505 510 4226. Phones are open officially right now. So if you want to start leaving me voicemails, you can, and I will play them live. Again, that's 505 510 4226. So yesterday I watched Mickey 17, and I didn't take any screen caps, but I took note of the whole thing because what we have been doing on this channel for some time is we have been covering this area where the movies and the entertainment are synchronized with the fake news events. And there's this relationship that we've been pointing out, this deliberate synchronization that's been obfuscated by bad explanations for a very long time. And those bad explanations no longer suffice, and we have a better explanation. The term concurrent programming is relevant here. So I see this trailer for Mickey 17, and I noted that it focuses on Robert Pattinson, the main character, who looks like Luigi in the trailer. We're talking, he's got the hoodie on, smiling like Luigi, and I thought that's foreshadowing. That's likely connected. So the movie would likely therefore contain the elements of the class warfare, the rich versus poor, the anti-Musk, anti-Trump stuff. Well, sure enough, this film contains a Trump character. This is something that's been noted by media critics, reviewers, that he acts. It's Mark Ruffalo acting like Trump. He's this. Well, he's like a politician, but it's also run like a cult. And he does this little dance. He does little hand signs like Trump did with the AOK sign. I mean, everything about this guy is Trump. And he's trying to colonize an all-white planet. And at one point, the Luigi character attempts to shoot him. The bullet grazes his cheek. So he's got this blood on his cheek. Sound familiar? Trump-esque character, Mark Ruffalo, who happens to have been born on JFK's death day. And he survives an assassination attempt. Well, further down the show, he is confronted with this antagonist, the character, he's the antagonist, but one of the protagonists is this female who I think represents Kamala Harris because of her opposition to him. And it's reminiscent of the black woman soldier in Civil War. And you have the Trump character in the White House. So looking at it through that lens, I thought this has got to be a Kamala archetype, some kind of successor to Trump. So he survives an assassination attempt, but then at the end, something else happens, and you have this mushroom cloud nuke-like explosion after he gets an injury to his eye. I mean, it's the usual stuff that we would expect. And at the end, this Kamala-like character takes the charge, takes over that position. So there's a number of elements that I noted here before about that movie, but specifically, the assassination attempt has another aspect to it where, so the bullet only grazes his head, but after he is shot at, he yells at the cameraman to turn the camera back on so he can pose for the camera against the backdrop of the chaos. And the people in the audience even had red hats like MAGA. So there were several elements in the assassination attempt scene that were right out of Butler, Pennsylvania. But this should not be possible. This couldn't be possible unless movies are quite literally propaganda designed to reinforce psyops. Yes, the movies are propaganda films to reinforce psyops that are incoming or concurrent. And they can't even disguise it anymore. And before the IPS think tank, the only people looking into it were truthers who were convinced this was evidence of simulation. Some people still fall into that trap. But the predictability of our model here speaks for itself. And having watched the movie, I knew it had a Trump-esque character who got shot at. I didn't know he would have not only a bandage on his head, but would pose for the camera after being shot at, which is exactly what Trump did. And of course, throw in the Luigi element and the mushroom cloud following the assassination attempt. It all lines up. And there are other levels to it as well. Let's see, we're joined here in the chat by... Now, what YouTube channel are we on? Are we on the main channel? We were live a little bit earlier, but OBS crashed, so now I'm using Streamlabs, so I think I solved the problem. No big deal. Someone's asking about the Discord. We're not using Discord. I would like to, but I don't have time. And I don't want an unmonitored Discord server festering because we have some antagonists, and I'm not paranoid here, but I know the pattern. And we've had this happen before, where we have a Discord server that gets pretty big, but then you have some people who spend all their time trying to maintain their particular ideology. And we're at the point where, no, we're throwing out all of the Trutherville stuff. We're getting rid of it. We don't have room for it. So there has to be some level of quality control. As I've said before, the raft would be pointless if we said, hey, let's let the Mandela affected on board. No, we'd be outnumbered by unreasonable people who are intransigent and unwilling to recognize that they have the capacity to be wrong. If your explanation for spelling a word wrong is that the dictionary changed because the universe shifted because of CERN, then we can't work with that. If you can't admit that you misspell words, we can't work with that. And one of the things I've been studying lately that I think is going to have to be a topic that we really hone in on here is the misinformation effect. Because I've really deconstructed the Mandela effect, but it's really just this thing called the misinformation effect, but it's being applied directly. And the misinformation effect has to do with the way that our recollections are tainted by prompts to remember something. And the context in which we remember it matters because it can influence how we remember it in the future. It's mind-bending stuff, but it's happening en masse all the time. And a lot of these AI vids that are coming out are filling people's minds up with these things that never happened. And they're passively taking this stuff in, and these fake events, fake situations and images and memes, they get cataloged internally with the real stuff. So the misinformation effect is this, it's like the Mandela effect, but it's happening on a very wide scale, and it's everywhere. And it's inescapable. That is, it's inescapable unless you are applying what I would term here an active mode of information processing when it comes to media, and people are trained to be passive. And the most passive media consumers, the most reactionary, are on the woke fringes, both left and right. But it is an effect. It's just not Mandela, it's misinformation. And what's getting them is that they're not lying. And this is where we have to be, very clear in how you describe things. The person who says, I remember Ed McMahon handing out big checks, that person is not lying. However, they're mistaken. And what happens is their memories have been misinformed. They've been augmented and altered. And what they are recalling as a memory is actually something that was imagined and then misprocessed, misfiled. And so you have to, I guess, give them a little leeway for self-deception and not understanding how their minds work. But another issue here is we have to recognize that we are inherently dupable. If we weren't trickable, if illusions didn't work, there wouldn't be magic shows. And when you're at a magic show, you are willingly suspending disbelief, entertaining this illusion, but it's not real magic. You just don't know how it happens to work when it's something truly fools you. But at no point do you think, well, this is magic because I can't explain it. And I think that's where we need to be when it comes to stuff in mass media in general. We may not have enough information, but we're not obliged to believe what we're told. We just have to recognize that it's a magic show and that we are capable of being fooled. We are Like no one's really immune to that. So you can't just go off of the visual. You can't just trust headlines. And many people aren't comfortable being in this area of just non-belief. Like, well, I don't know. I don't know if it's true or not. I need time. Because you're supposed to react to stuff immediately. I mean, people are crying wolf. If you're not reacting, you're not helping the herd to survive. You're not waking people up. What's up, Marcel, Renrek, Tunax, P Trippa? Yeah, we're still open phones. And the main thing tonight, though, is I just want to point out that Mickey 17 fits a pattern. It's one of more than half a dozen. So we can rest on the answers that we have arrived at here. We're not in the fog of Psywar. We're not confused. We're not Mendoozled. And we're not under the spell of this new age metaphysical construct of the simulation as an explanation for things we can't explain. That's lazy and it no longer suffices. And there is a point to this. There's this tendency of people to want to try to convince everybody. So if everybody agrees, we can wake up. I first heard this idea from David Icke. He's like, well, if only 5% of the population wakes up, it'll raise the vibes and everybody will wake up. No, that's never going to happen. It's not even a remote possibility or likelihood. Nor should you want or care that you convince everybody else. It's a waste of time. And there's a fundamental distinction between passive belief and actively seeking the truth and actively choosing to not believe. So what I advocate here is the informed disbelief, which is far better than low information belief. And these are qualitative distinctions that need to be made. So not all opinions are equal. And that's one of the reasons why I think I had to wait on Discord is there you get these relativists who think, well, every opinion is equally valid. And no, that's actually not true. We can't weigh things as equal when they're not. Or if something has been discredited, you just have to take your model, go home and fix it before you bring it back. Like I won't even debate chemtrail believers anymore because they're too lazy to formulate a model that they can make predictions off of. And they are ignoring the fact that condensation trails are in fact predictable. Like that matters. And what we have arrived at here is that the entertainment propaganda is deliberately synchronized with fake news events. And that's a big deal. It's the only legitimate conspiracy worth looking into right now. And a lot of people underestimate the significance of it because they're caught up in the drama of the World War III, Civil War, race war, just Middle East drama, all these things, the identity politics, the wokeness on the left and the right, that stuff distracts people, especially truthers who should be the ones noticing this, from the psychological warfare that is ubiquitous. And they're distracted by the shadows on the wall. But again, that's because they're believers and they react. They're not actively consuming, but they're passively consuming the information. And what I want to do is just leave them out of the Discord server is the whole point. We're not going to get anywhere if we entertain intransigent believers who are, when I say believers, I'm talking about a different psychoepistemology. We're talking about mind aids patients. And we can cure it, sure. We can provide you with mind war inoculation. But if you're still giving benefit of the doubt to the mainstream media, you're actually on the wrong side of the fence. Like, you're on the wrong team. Thank you, Marcel. Michelle K., D. Brooks, Kate Emma, Diana Southard, Lasers Go Pew Pew have all received the blue wrenches. Yeah, this channel was shut down for a week because of a Kanye West video parody that I made. And even though it's parody, it got banned. Just because they're trying to make a point with him. Banning his new music because of his Hitler stuff. And he's even backtracked on it. Edgelord Ye now says he's backtracking and he no longer hates these people. I don't really find it all that groundbreaking. He's just trying to mainstream 4chan content in 2025. Sorry, that's 8 years too late. Like, that already happened a long time ago. You're not going to reshock people with the same memes that 4chan were circulating several years ago. All you're going to do is get banned, and then you can play the victim card. Oh, look at me being censored. And that's a victim card that a lot of big truther channels play, where they act like they're being suppressed because they criticize a certain group, and now they're victims, and you must support them because they're victims. That gets kind of tiresome. And it's a strategy, because they're not really being censored. They're being acknowledged. And that's different. The real, quote, censorship, the real people who are the ones that I think when you think about censorship, you're talking about people who are being truly excluded. And the ones that are being excluded are the ones you don't actually ever hear about. And it's because, of course, we're saying things that even the conspiracy fringe can't talk about, because it would undermine their existence. I mean, Alex Jones and company are constantly flipping out. He gets angry. He turns tomato red in the face, ranting about how we're all going to get nuked to death. Well, how would that fly if he didn't believe in nukes anymore? You couldn't rage about something. Or if you built up an entire platform on outrage about geoengineering, you can't suddenly change your position and say, okay, that was actually a nothing burger. Because they make money by crying wolf. And now if they say that the wolf isn't real, it kind of undermines them. But yeah, we're back on. We're not going to get any more strikes. I'm not going to upload any more satire cartoons, because apparently those are specifically targeted, I think. Maybe because their virality. But that's the second time in a row where I made a move towards restarting South Pole, and then we get shut down. So it made me think I just need to speed up the process. So I'm looking into AI solutions to produce more episodes faster. And as far as the censorship thing, we just can't upload it on these channels. No big deal. But it's not going to stop the thing. It just shows that it's working. The fact that we get censored in a way that we get blocked for uploading these cartoons means that they're probably striking a nerve. Or somebody's flagging them on purpose, which is also possible. I mean, there's a number of people in these videos that like Witsit Gets It was in it. He might have done it. I mean, I can understand why people would actually possibly ban South Pole. But they called it hate speech. And it kind of was hate speech. The scene was Ye on all fours with a balloon over his head with helium. And then Bianca Censori is walking him on a leash and kicking him in the rear end. And then at some point, she runs out of helium, or they run out of helium because they're babysitting him. So he's unleashed. He runs off the leash. And next thing you know, he's wearing a swastika shirt, and he's hailing Hitler and saluting the camera. Well, that was like 2 months ago. That video got us censored because he did that for real, like last week or something. We just predicted the future on that one. Tom Woodward said, I watched the previous Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, pretty on the nose with Tom Cruise hunting for a literal twin cross key. Oh yeah, if you look at our analysis of Tom Cruise as what he represents on the world stage and how he's been represented, because I've been paying attention to him since his significant role in Eyes Wide Shut, which places him in the same vicinity as Stanley Kubrick, which raises a lot of interesting questions, especially because Tom Cruise is going to space. But we were breaking down the significance of his name. And in Top Gun 2, I uncovered quite a bit of symbolism that I put into a blog post that I might reshare. But I talked about how his name Thomas means twin, Cruise, cross, and there's twin cross symbolism, which is a reference to like a second coming, resurrection. But it's all over his character, his world stage persona, this Jesus Christ of Scientology. And sure enough, in this Mission Impossible, he's got to find these two crosses, so these twin crosses, to make this key. But if you go through his catalog, like Vanilla Sky, he's 33, he dies 3 days later, is resurrected. You can find an incredible body of mystery Babylon theater all over Tom Cruise's character. I refer to him as this Gnostic Christ. And that's one of the consistent themes with him is falling. And I've been pointing this out. I put this in a book even in 2020, that he coincides with this falling man theme, whatever that means. The man who fell to earth, the falling man. the hanged man. And if you look at his movies, he's always the hanged man, always falling, dangling off a building, off a plane, off a cliff. Vanilla Sky jumping off a building. He shows up at the Paris Olympics. He repels. In front of the world, he falls, 42 meters. So what is that? Well, it even gets deeper because I think if you look into the character of David Bowman from Space Odyssey and then the relationship with David Bowie, Space Oddity, David Bowie has that song about Major Tom. Like Major Tom to Ground Control. It's this song about this astronaut who gets stranded in space or something. And I think this all does tie in, weirdly enough, to Tom Cruise. And in Top Gun 2, it opens up with a scene where he is going Mach 10 in this experimental craft. But the cinematography, the way he looks, and where he lands in this rural area and someone thinks he's an alien, it's actually a recreation of Yuri Gagarin, the first man in space, who died a tragic death, but was this big national hero. Now, I can see some overlapping here with Tom Cruise and Yuri Gagarin, and they put that into Top Gun 2. It's undeniable. I noted it probably first in my blog, but months later I saw it pop up in some review. My point being, his world stage character corresponds to this Major Tom who has this tragedy in space. Quite a lot more. But no, Vanilla Sky, of course, it was Penelope Cruz. He was in this. He owns this company called Rise. It's a magazine company. Quite a lot we could go into with that movie. In fact, I have this theory that Vanilla Sky can be looked at as a sequel to Eyes Wide Shut if you accept this subtext that Eyes Wide Shut is actually about the death or staged death of JFK Jr., who continues to live in a mask in New York. The story tracks. It tracks with Q lore, which is all kind of entertaining stuff about the Kennedys, but this is a narrative thread that was first picked up on by Chartword, who did quite a lot of work on Stanley Kubrick. See, Stanley Kubrick needs to be demystified. Some people think, oh, he was whistleblowing about the elite with Eyes Wide Shut. He was whistleblowing about how he was so good that he was recruited to fake the moon landing. No, Stanley Kubrick is not on your side. He's a programmer. He's a metascripter. His work has been used in the capacity of predictive programming or conditioning for a lot of major transformative psychological operations that have happened since the 60s, from the Kennedy assassination, I suspect the Challenger, but 9/11 for sure, COVID. His fingerprints are all over it, but it's not just him. He's just one of many directors who have movies that actually correlate to the psychological warfare. So people are mistaken if they think that he's some kind of anomaly. It's like, no, doesn't quite work that way. But he's an enigmatic character and worth looking at. I think there's a lot of deep code in his personage, but I think he's also something of a limit. He's like a limited hangout where there are channels who for years have talked about Stanley Kubrick's movies and how they're uncannily predicting things, but they're always talking about like Apollo 11 or MK Ultra. Like Jay Dyer has these documentaries. You know what's conspicuous to me is that Jay Dyer and these others who have done these documentaries on Stanley Kubrick's movies, they never noticed that he put all kinds of 9/11 stuff in there. And the 9/11 stuff in the Kubrick films is some of those blatant and consistent bits of prediction in a movie, analogous to what we see in other movies by people like, for example, James Cameron, these 9/11 references to a future fake event. But the sequel to The Shining, also written by Stephen King, actually has a character who predicts 9/11, a psychic child. Just kind of reiterates the theme. But anyhow, this as this connects to Tom Cruise that somebody brought up. So Tom Cruise is in this Eyes Wide Shut, which, the movie was released on the day JFK Jr. died. And there's some further connections with Kubrick and the Kennedys worth exploring. The same author who made this connection with Tom Cruise's character in Eyes Wide Shut and JFK Jr., Chartward, that's the name of the blog, he also made these strong connections that show that Joker in Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket is based on JFK. And the target on the head, on the helmet rather, is sort of an allusion to that. But Tom Cruise is also a Scientologist, which ties into the space religion. And Scientology, of course, founded by L. Ron Hubbard, who was there with the American counterpart to Aleister Crowley, Jack Parsons, and Marjorie Cameron. So we're talking about this Babylon working. So the merging of Satanism, movies, and outer space has been this reoccurring theme in the formation of this new world vision or new world view, which is this, I call it NASAtology. So it's highly significant that Kubrick and Cruise work together just because of this whole idea that we've moved into this world religion of NASAtology, essentially a space religion where outer space has become a heaven, a new iteration of heaven. It's also interesting that Kubrick's daughter is a Scientologist because Scientology is a space religion, and that's really what it is. It's not just a kooky cult, because all religions are kooky cults. You know, what's the definition of a cult? The church down the street from yours. That's pretty much how it is. But behind all that, you know, Scientology does have a structure. It has a concept of the world where it's not, I mean, it's like spiritual warfare in a sense, but they believe in essentially mind viruses. And this all ties into where we are right now today. The idea of the mind virus. A thought that's contagious, a bad thought. And that people carry these contagious thoughts. So with Scientology, you're going through this process of purging yourself of all these mind viruses, which they call engrams. And until you get rid of all these, you will not be mentally healthy. And if you're around somebody who has them, well, you catch them. And now you have to get cleaned again. So you're discouraged from hanging around people who are unwell. And the idea here is, of course, you've got to quarantine with the cult. So instead of sin, you've got mind viruses. So you can see how that concept of the mind virus has been introduced to a society that's, even if you're an atheist, well, now you have a counterpart to blasphemy. You have a counterpart to sin. They've even introduced, I think, a new iteration of sin, sinners, saved and unsaved, with the pandemic model. And the pandemic model, or rather the idea of there is this thing that we all have to lock down because of, and the non-converts or the anti-vaxxers represent the threat. That's the same model Scientology has, where the people who don't accept the Scientology cleansing are considered to be, quote, suppressives, SPs. A suppressive person is basically a mind virus super spreader. And we're at this stage where people are now accepting the idea that mind viruses exist, and these are existential threats to civilization. And they're going to be considered, I think if they aren't already, a bigger threat than an actual virus, the type that comes out of underheated bowls of bat soup. And they're going to arrive at this because the consequence of unmitigated, unrestrained, unadulterated mind virus propagation through X is going to result in some calamity. Maybe on June 11th. But this calamity, this result of disease X is going to be the turning point where people are going to say, look, freedom of speech was cool, but we're going to have to lock it down a bit because people like Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes and Alex Jones have said some things that have caused this group to go this crazy, and they did this bad thing. This is the disease X that we've been waiting for. But yes, space religion, new concept of sin that the godless will believe in. You know, I've said this before, that Gaia is a god construct. The flood myth is an eschatology. Space is a new heaven. COVID is a devil that the atheists will believe in. And it has effectively allowed the state church, which is mass media, to designate the saved and the unsaved based on, do you believe in our teachings? Do you accept our injectable Eucharist? And if you don't, well, now you're polarized. Now you're unclean. Now you're dirty. You're unsaved. And I think this is why RFK Jr. is representing himself the way that he is. I've been saying there's a psyop built into this guy. Like, why is he always walking around barefoot on airplanes? He's field dressing bloated bear carcasses to take them home to eat. He's taking his grandchildren swimming on Mother's Day in sewage. Every time I look at RFK Jr., it's just something gross. But he's always advocating for nature, nature, natural immunity. So he has this reputation of being nature boy, not to mention anti-vax. So he's all about, like, so when I say nature, I mean like heathen, people of the heat, the wilderness, the pagan. And I think that's what we're talking about, the pagan or the heathens versus the saved, the clean and the unclean. And I think he's meant to epitomize the unclean, the unsaved, the ones who don't believe media, the conspiracy theorists. Yeah, phone is open, 505-510-4226. So I switched to Streamlabs, and it looks like all of my problems have gone away. All right, let's see here. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I just want to point out that I had this book ready to go called Lie World. And in this, I'm describing how the political horseshoe model has been built into our worldview. So it's not just a theory, but they have created these identical fringes. And it's called a horseshoe because it doesn't quite meet like a circle. But the further they go on the fringes, the more they bend inward, the more they resemble each other. And what's the difference between Antifa, Soy Boy, and a Proud Boy, Patriot Front? Soy Boy, Proud Boy. What's the difference? And I'm saying there is no difference. And I've been describing this for some time. Well, I've been describing this process of how they divide people, and I've been calling it red pill wokeism, right-wing wokeism. Well, now that is going mainstream, not because of me, because of somebody else, but all of a sudden, a lot of people are talking about it. And here's an article that just came out from AFR.com. Same energy, opposite direction, rise of the woke right. Hey, what's up, caller? Can you hear me? I may have to adjust my settings. Give me just a moment. But my point is, I'm highlighting here that there is a structure. Okay, so I can't hear the caller. I'm just going to go ahead and continue. But
hey, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, what's up?
Okay, yeah. I thought you said you had to adjust your settings a little bit, but hey, it's Leo Pirate.
Hey, what's up, Leo Pirate?
Yeah. So I actually wanted to call in to talk a little bit about Final Destination. I have quite an info dump on some things I found.
Oh yeah, because Final Destination Bloodlines, as we've been talking about, just came out, and it's connecting 9/11 and a future Seattle event in a very strong way. But yeah, what did you see in it? And did you watch the whole series?
Yep. Yeah. Before I went to see it, and I saw it in theaters with D box seatings. I didn't even know what that was, but it's a type of like seats that vibrate and move with the screen. And I went with a group, and that intro Seattle Space Needle scene was like an amusement park ride. It was wild. But I did watch the entire series leading up to it because I had never seen any of these movies before. I'd seen the commercials for them growing up, but I just never watched them. And it's really bad, as you would imagine, but they have tons of stuff in it. And it's good you bring up the 9/11 connection. The first Final Destination came out the year before 9/11, so in the year 2000. And it is about an airplane crash that takes off from JFK Airport. So the whole movie is about characters surviving, an airplane crash that took place in New York City a year before 9/11.
Okay,
So
let me
that's
add
pretty clear.
one thing
And
to add
I'm
on
not
this.
sure, Tim, have you seen?
Yes, JFK Airport. That connection there is worth noting because there's always a connection between JFK and 9/11, and that's because it's the same director. Remember that movie series, the X Files spinoff, Lone Gunman? Lone Gunman, a character named for Lee Harvey Oswald,
Yes.
but that was the one that predicted 9/11 to a T. So again, this 9/11 JFK connection is because there's a common metascriptor here, and these things are constantly overlapping. So I'm glad you caught that detail. Again, Final Destination, the first one, was pre 9/11, and it gave everybody a visceral experience of dying in an airplane. And you know what's interesting about it is that this new one opens up where people are dying in a tower. So if you want to have scenery reflecting both
Yeah.
aspects of 9/11, you have it in the new Final Destination and the first one. So there's a bookending here. They connect these two very strongly.
Yeah, and the writer's name who worked on the X Files and the Lone Gunman, his name is Glenn Morgan, and I looked him up, and he is a graduate of the private Jesuit school Loyola Marymount University, which is the same place that Mel Gibson got his honorary doctorate from. So Jesuit theater, of course, through and through. I happened to find that out, right? But he's a metascriptor for sure. And the X Files, huge contributions to conspiracy culture, the UFO delusion. So he's just it's like their job. It's like when we point out metascriptors on the show, it's not so much conspiracy as it is media analysis. This is their job. They put in these messages into films, TV shows to give a visceral experience to add legitimacy to a fake news event. So in the future, if there ever is a Seattle Space Needle event, if you saw the new Final Destination Bloodlines in theaters, you kind of experienced it. It adds to whatever you see in the news. But oh man, Tim, I have so much going on, and I recommend. Have you seen any of the movies? I
Yes.
know you saw
In
Bloodlines, but
fact,
have you seen any of the older ones?
when I first watched these movies, this was around the time that I first started noticing stuff in movies like Easter eggs, weird occult subtext, and I would so when I watched Final Destination, I had noticed all the conspicuous uses of the number 23. So what that tells you, because if you look into it, and various fan sites point this out, they encode numerology into the film. The number 23 is a reoccurring theme. But the purpose of it, of bringing this up, is that the film is showing that the directors are at least cognizant of this ability to insert covert messaging that the public wouldn't really know about. And that's how all of the messaging that we're talking about is inserted. It's deliberate. And so yeah, these movies are um, all integrated with the major psyops of 9/11 and this prediction for Seattle or a space needle. And one of the things about it too is the new one is set in 1968. That's when the tower's construction began.
Yeah.
Space Odyssey 2001. 33 years later, the towers fall. So again, the movie is, I think, very, very deliberately connecting these things. And one more point here. I just happened to look at the news today about the Space Needle, and there's all kinds of stories about how they just opened the new elevator called the Skyliner. The Skyliner. This is the one that they paid $100 million for. They just put this out there
Oh
today.
wow.
So their Skyliner elevator just opened.
And on the Wikipedia page for the Seattle Space Needle, they tout about how the elevator can bring you up in 41 seconds, and then earlier revisions it says 43 seconds. So it's
Yeah,
42
it
seconds.
was
That's how long it
42.
takes you to get to the top.
When I first started looking at the Seattle Space Needle, they said the UFO is 42 meters wide. It's a 42-second trip up. They had this time capsule in there that was in for 42 years. Like, I was finding all kinds of stuff, but I think they're trying to occult it a bit. But in the movie, it was the Skyview restaurant, and so now you have the Skyliner just opened up like today or something. So the timing of that is very
Yeah,
interesting because didn't
and
I
that's
say the $100 million they put into the Space Needle is probably paying for the psyop, and the timing of it is just impeccable.
yeah, and you've already pointed out how the $100 bill is quite significant in across different films for predictive programming. Like I think Sonic the Hedgehog 2, like he stops these robbers that are planting pipe bombs around the Seattle Space Needle as $100 bills fly around everywhere. In Megalopolis, the character played by Shia LaBeouf, he signs $100 bills and throws them out everywhere. And $100 million is what went into the Seattle Space Needle, which is located nearby the Experience Music Project, EMP.
The
So there's certainly
Century.
something tied to.
Well, the Century Project. Yeah, you said EMP. That's where the Chris Cornell statue is. And of course, they just performed Black Hole Sun on The Voice, and Soundgarden is going into the Hall of Fame right now. So there's that connection. So you have this Seattle reference in the news right now, the Space Needle just reopening, and then it's called the Century Project, where they put $100 million into it, and there's been this constant refrain of the penny, the cent, and the Abe Lincoln, which has been a reoccurring image here with Lincoln, but you saw it too, right? In the beginning of this movie, when the Space Needle blows up, there's a penny right in front of it, right on the trailer. So they constantly associate an assassinated president and the Civil War with the exploding Space Needle.
Yeah, and no point in the film does it say it takes place in the year 1968. There is no narrator or dialogue like that. But when the child throws the penny off the Skyview Seattle Space Needle, right, it zooms in, and the year of the penny is 1968. So it's very visual. It's very subtle. It's subconsciously planted in the mind. And Abraham Lincoln is significant because, of course, he was assassinated, associated with the Civil War. And in King Kill 33 by James Shelby Downward, and his deconstruction of the Masonic symbolism and the JFK assassination, he noted that before going to the car parade, JFK was prominently pictured next to portraits of Lincoln, and he was driving in a Lincoln Continental. Like the subconscious association of an assassination and Lincoln is undeniable, and they decorate these art pieces, events to keep drudging up that subconscious imagery. And I'm bringing that up because today, this happened today, Tim. There's all these, flurry of news articles about how Trump will be ending the production of the penny. But more curiously, in the Yahoo News article about it, what do you think they had? Trump photographed next to a portrait of Abraham Lincoln. Of course, Lincoln's on the penny too, but think of the King
Yes,
Hill
the
association with it.
okay. So a couple things. The USDA building had this big portrait of Lincoln and Trump put on it. Then we have the penny reference, of course, 1968 in the movie, a Civil War reference, and as you pointed out, JFK and Lincoln have been correlated over the assassination in many meta scripty ways. So now they're also transferring that connection to Trump. And there's been a lot of Kennedy-Trump connections. If you look at the whole Q movement was worshiping Kennedy as Trump. They thought Trump was was John Kennedy in a suit. So they've made these connections pretty overtly over the last few years. And the headlines now, if you look, it says the U.S. Mint moves ahead to kill the penny. Kill the penny, following Trump's orders. So kill the penny is kind of a bizarre expression. And of course, in the movie that we're talking about here, Final Destination, the character throws the 1968 penny and it goes into the works of the Space Needle, which results in it blowing up. So what does this all mean? In my view, the Space Needle is America, the Tower of Babel, the West. And the penny represents the Civil War, class war, Daniel Penny. It represents the assassinated president also. But the fact that they're constantly using it in this context with Trump, to me, this is definitely, it's about the symbolism.
Yeah, and the thing I was going to say about the Final Destination series as a whole, there are 6 movies. Bloodline is the 6th one. It's a part of the plot of the movies to look for background details. You notice that the characters, they notice when death is working, they do the kind of stuff we do, where they start seeing in the background 180, because Flight 180 was the commercial airline that took off from JFK and crashed in the first Final Destination movie. And in the third movie, for anyone who's watching now thinking that we're stretching our interpretation about Flight 180 being tied to 9/11, in the third movie, at a funeral, a character pulls out a picture of Lincoln and says, "Look at this line through his head, right? That's where he was shot." Then she produces a picture of the Twin Towers with a shadow of an airplane on it. She said, "Do you see this? look at that. And then she busts out one of those scenes from the second movie and says, look at the sign, Flight 180, or it says next 180. And for them, 180 is code like R33. We use 33 as a hoax code. When a news event has 33 all over it, it's like it's fake. For them in the movie, when 180 appears in the background or in a freak accident, it means death was involved, and they think it's real. So they do like meta script analysis for things they think are real, where death is involved. When
Okay,
in
180.
reality, we're talking about
Okay, I was just watching Mickey 17, and in it, okay, so Mark Ruffalo character is playing a Trump character. It's 100% Trump. He gets shot by the Luigi character. Robert Pattinson's character looks like Luigi in the scene, and it's the same kind of class warfare narrative, so it fits. He even has a cut on his cheek, and then he poses for the camera after he's shot. So Butler, Pennsylvania, that whole scene was kind of reenacted here, which of course doesn't make sense unless you understand how propaganda works today. But at the end of the movie, when they're finally killing him, first he gets punched in the eye, and his eyes kind of like red and bloodied, and then they have to push a button to detonate a bomb, which creates this big mushroom cloud. But the button is a circle button with an 18 on it, so like 180. But when they push that is when he dies and it all blows up. And I thought that's kind of interesting because you were noting the 180 stuff in Final Destination.
that is fascinating because basically having watched the whole series, the 180 really, I'm like, what does it mean as far as gematria is concerned, and or not gematria, I shouldn't say that. Symbolically, kind of we've tied 33 to the great work, order out of chaos, phoenix imagery, right? So usually when it's in a news story, it's a hoax. But what does 180 mean? Well, I looked into it a little bit, and ChatGPT told me, oh, obviously there's too many words it could add up to. But one of the examples, which it found on the internet that other people found, is Donald Trump is dead adds up to 180. But I don't place much value in that. There are too many words that can add up to that. But I asked, was it JL, what he thought about it. And he mentioned that, the 1-8 is the birthday of Elvis, and the zero is like a crown. And, Elvis's connections to Trump. Basically, I see 180 as this persistent symbol as like the killing of Donald Trump. Like it's a part of it. It's just and the thing is in those movies, particularly in the first and the third movie, all the locations are named after assassinated presidents. They go to what is it, the JFK airport. They go to Mount Abraham High, Abraham Lincoln. In the third movie, their high school is called McKinley High School, another assassinated president. Like all their names are about it. And the main character in the first movie even notes the music playing at the airport. He's like, wait a minute, this song is by this guy. And he died in an airplane. So it's a part of the script in the movie. And similar to how we've talked about that these propaganda films always give the wrong perspective. Because in the characters in these movies, when they look for these things, they think it's actually going to cause death.
Well,
But when we point out these things,
but it's intriguing how the whole series, the big reveal, is that even though the first one was already noted as having foreshadowing characteristics for 9/11, from the very beginning, since this movie is kind of a prequel, it was always about a prophecy involving the destruction of the Space Needle. So that's kind of like the overarching theme here is that was always the purpose of the movie. And so we're looking back 1968 when that thing happens, and then it doesn't happen because they stopped it. But the 9/11 thing happens, and that was Death's attempt to hit back because he didn't get them at the Space Needle. But it kind of leaves it open now at the end of the movie because the Space Needle hasn't been destroyed. It just happened in the prophecy. So the prophecy never really came true. And so my question here is it just seems to me anyway that the timing of it being released leading up to June 11th, the timing of it really stands out. The timing of the Century Project and opening the Skyliner elevator, because in the movie they made several references to the sky view. That was like
and the elevator too.
and the elevator. That's
Remember
right.
how nervous she was going up the elevator, and there's a gruesome death where half his body is ripped through the elevator and stuff. Yeah, the elevator does play a key component in the intro. That's what I thought of when you mentioned that there was a recent renovation to the elevator. And I was going to say one more thing about the film series. Yeah, Bloodlines. Yeah, the big plot, the overarching plot is that all the characters in the series are somehow tied to that original prophetic vision to stop the destruction of the Skyview, aka the Space Needle. And there's even right eye wound programming in the films. In the fourth movie, a mother gets a rock shot through her right eye, and that's how she dies. In the fifth movie, there's a LASIK eye surgery that focuses on the right eye. And the main character's name in Final Destination Bloodlines, the grandmother, the old one from the flashback to 1968, her name is Iris. So her name is Iris, and she's
Oh, I see.
proposed.
I see. On the
Yeah,
Space
and
Needle.
she gets on the Space Needle. Yeah, so she gets a proposal to get married at the Space Needle. This is curious because the opening of the Space Needle, JL told me this. Well, who do you think was there at the opening of the Space Needle and even filmed part of a movie there? Elvis, of course, right? So
Okay, now
always the Elvis stuff. Yeah,
space chimps asking, didn't they renovate the building in the movie? Now that I think about it, see the opening scene, the main character is blindfolded, and her fiance is taking her up there to propose to her, and so the first thing she sees is she's looking at the Space Needle, but I think she said something like she didn't know it was open yet. So it had just
yes,
been
yeah,
newly
the grand
opened.
opening.
So it's a grand opening, and here we are looking at the grand opening of. So that was the grand opening of Skyview. And just yesterday they announced the grand opening of Skyliner.
Yeah, I mean like I had said before, they never give a year, a specific year, but the overall aesthetics, the clothing, the music, and the penny as well, it very clearly dates it around the opening of the Seattle Space Needle. So it's there. It undoubtedly the Seattle Space Needle, and I wanted to bring that up because in the fifth movie, it begins with a big bridge accident. I don't know if you saw the horrific like bridge accident, falls down, like guys they get like these parts of construction stuff flung through. It's really gross. All the movies are really gross. But that bridge, if you look at it, it's a fictional bridge in the lore of the film. It's somewhere in upstate New York. It doesn't exist. It's not real. But the filming location of it was the Lionsgate Bridge in Vancouver, California, and its architecture was based off the Golden Gate Bridge. So it's very clear that even though these are fictional locations, they are indeed based off of real locations. So it's not a stretch at all to say that the Skyview uh, place in the Bloodlines is really based on the Seattle Space Needle. And yeah, I wanted to say about Iris, her name being Iris and Elvis being there as well, and her getting proposed there. I almost see it as our eye. Our eye is being married to the alternate world that they create, the alternate world, and that's the ultimate union of our eyes with the fictional perception they create through the screen. Because that's really what they're doing with these films and staged news events.
Well,
And merging
okay,
the two, it's like the eclipse of the sun and moon. Yeah.
yeah, the merging of the two, and the corona, this symbol of the sun, the moon merging, the dream world and the waking world. And when she shows up at the Space Needle, they're playing Johnny Cash's song "Ring of Fire," which I think could be a corona reference. But this is another example of how right we are. Listen to this. This is from today. The Space Needle's new Skyliner, the first elevator of its kind, opens on Friday to the public. This is the first milestone in the $100 million modernization project. So as of right now, the Skyliner is being revealed on Friday, so tomorrow, right? And then I'm looking at the Final Destination Wikipedia on the plot, and the opening scene in the description here is that the characters are showing up at the opening of the Skyview, the opening ceremony. So we have another overlapping here. Opening of the first of its kind Skyliner, and then the Skyview opening in the movie. And in both the disaster is the association here.
Yeah, and that's like the most incredible thing because I don't even know. Do you think it'll be this year or in the future some kind of Seattle-based disaster? Because I almost think it's too close. The film has been doing quite well in box office, like, but at the same time, I'm like, could it be too close? No, like remember
No,
the
look at
Netflix? Yeah,
you look at the Trump wound. Every single clear example of the Trump head wound in these major movies, HBO, Netflix, mainstream movies that we've talked about, happened at the same time. And the timing of this, with the opening ceremony when the disaster happens, and now the thing is opening tomorrow for the Century Project, which I've said since 2019, the Century Project is funding the Seattle 9/11. So is it going to happen on this
Definitely.
6/11? I don't see why it wouldn't. As far as our predictive model goes, it seems like no, it's perfectly timed. It's time for a disaster. They paid for it. Century Project, and again, uh, the fact of the timing of the movie posters being out there, and the poster itself has the Space Needle blowing up. Like, this is too perfect. And then, did you notice the poster it has where the bodies are falling into the mouth of a skull, and how it kind of resembles the people falling off that Mexican ship?
Yup, jumpers. Yup, there were jumpers in that movie in the Final Destination Bloodlines, and that of course matches up with what we saw at the recent event with the boat and the bridge, and it might even be repeated in the future with whatever happens in Seattle. The jumper imagery is consistent because in James Cameron's Titanic, they also had jumpers. There was a lot of jumper imagery time
Oh,
leading up to the first 9/11.
good call. Yes, James Cameron's Titanic, the boat splits in two, you have jumpers. And in this movie, I noticed that when the UFO, when the Space Needle begins tilting, you got wine bottles rolling across the floor, the piano, and I was like, "Wait a minute, this is like a scene out of the Titanic." So it correlates Titanic, which has already been connected to 9/11, with the Twin Tower slash Space Needle destruction, symbols of the West, as the Titanic is. And these overlapping allusions to these themes that point to the same general picture is why I'm looking at this so closely, as it's probably about to happen. And I didn't know until a few hours ago. I just randomly searched the Space Needle and it said, yeah, tomorrow they're opening up the Skyliner. And I'm like, wait a minute, didn't the movie begin with an opening ceremony at the Space Needle? So it all just, to me, it's way too synchronized. It's in the public's mind. This movie's going to be a huge hit, over the next coming weeks. It's doing well. So I kind of think my eyes are on Seattle.
Yeah, and the thing is, when they have these news stories like, oh, this grand opening of this new renovation, it's to make people's eyes on the world stage focus, and it's targeted marketing. The Final Destination Bloodlines film, Final Destination series in general, I would call it like a teenager slasher flick. So it's made for that age demographic. I wouldn't imagine, my older parents and stuff watching that kind of film, but they're probably paying attention to the news. So basically, it's to get as many eyes as possible on Seattle in as many different modalities as possible. And the news is just another medium, much like a Hollywood film. So it's kind of drawing everyone's attention to that. The other thing, because we're talking so much about 9/11, and you mentioned Titanic, James Cameron, uh, big switch of topic. Yesterday, I watched with a group of friends online streaming the J.D. Vance biopic that came out in 2020 called Hillbilly Elegy from director Ron Howard. Uh, a little strange, Tim, because it's like 2020. J.D. Vance didn't even know, no one even knew who he was. He was certainly not a candidate for VP, but there is a Netflix biopic made about him, like a biography film called uh, Hillbilly Elegy, based on his memoir. We watched it. It was terrible. I hated it. It was awful. But there's one part conspicuously halfway through the film where young, childlike JD Vance is with his grandma, and on the TV, what do you think they're watching? Terminator 2 for some reason, right? Terminator 2 is on the screen, and the grandma makes a big deal about it, says "Hasta la vista" and stuff. And then she says the weirdest line that I still have screenshots of to JD: "You can be a good Terminator or a bad Terminator. You're a good Terminator." That's,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like,
that
what?
is.
Like,
And of course, Terminator, James Cameron film, and somebody was filming James Cameron filming the evil cops in that movie, the evil cop Terminator, and then he's going home and he films real life evil cops beating up Rodney King, and that video starts the riots. So you got this interesting connection with Terminator, LA riots, Terminator 9/11, James Cameron 9/11. I mean, it is rather layered here. And So in the Space Needle scene, they're dancing to the song "Shout," and then the floor
Yes.
begins cracking. And someone asked about drills going on in Seattle. Well, for years they have been doing earthquake drills, these mass casualty drills, earthquake drills. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, the cracking in the floor, she was calling attention to it. And I'm thinking maybe even the song Shout has some kind of a connection here with EMP or something. But it was during the song Shout, everyone dancing, that the crack in the floor spreads and then the floor falls out. So to me, that's suggesting nukes, fallout, rather a fault line. But anyway, you kind of see the
Yeah, yeah.
foreshadowing
You
here.
can almost. Oh, there's actually a screen. Hey, I don't want to encourage these kind, but I'm just saying there are ways to find the film online, right? And if you look at that first scene, just for those of you who can't see it in theaters yourselves, the first scene, there's so many parts about it. Yeah, the cracking floor, earthquake, right? Then a woman is running on fire, and then it leads mixed with the oxygen that was the penny had caused. It causes an explosion. So you got sky explosion, cracking floor, you got jumpers, you got a failing elevator. It's really, there are so many different ways to slice and dice what might happen in Seattle, but I think it's clear whatever it may be, it's going to be some kind of disaster. And you've noted before that there is as much, if not more, predictive programming for the destruction of the Seattle Space Needle as there was for the Twin Towers. In Wolverine, Deadpool, Wolverine, whatever the movie is, that came out during the summer of 2024. Uh, both Wolverine and Deadpool, they're sent to like this nether realm where things go to be just whatever, the garbage land, if you will. And in the background, very shortly, it's a blink and you miss it. You see the Seattle Space Needle is in the background, destroyed. So like
Okay,
they get
okay,
teleported to this destroyed realm. Yeah.
and okay, these things are put into our subconscious, and I've heard some critics of it saying, well, there's the only people who notice predictive programming are weirdos in the corner of the internet, and I'm like, no, it's not about noticing it. It's about being exposed to it. Because our consciousness, in order to function, necessarily filters out of our awareness a lot of what we take in. But we're still taking it in. And you can see the efficacy of this when you go to examples of movies on YouTube or clips that reference or seem to have predicted something. Like a case in point, the Machete movie. Right after Trump was shot at, people went right over to a movie from 2010 and said, hey, this was Trump's point of view just 10 minutes ago. And I'm like, wait a minute here. You're telling me people see something on the news and their memory associates it with some crappy movie from 15 years before that accurately predicted it? So it just tells me that the programmers know very well our ability to recall and associate things. And so I just say that they're boring neural pathways so that when they do something, we make all the appropriate connections and react like robots.
React rather than think, because you already have, as you said, a burrowed neural pathway or a preconditioned programmed acceptance of associating with whatever staged event occurs. There is no questioning. There is no, in fact, to do the kind of stuff that the think tank does, where when a news story is announced, to look at it without emotions, to critically analyze the facts. It's seen as ghoulish to people who have been programmed. They're like, why would you ever question? Look at this tragedy. Look at what was shown on the screen. How on earth could you question whether or not, thousands of people died? Oh my goodness. And it's going to be, it's going to be like that just as it was during the Crown event, just as it was during all of these. And it's, we're really beyond the looking glass at this point because like when I was younger, there were many YouTube channels, and there still are, dedicated to predictive programming, but it's all retroactive. So they're like, wow, here's this event that already happened. Look at these films from long ago, pointing to it. It's kind of compelling, but it seems disjointed all over the place. What you've been doing, Tim, and everyone at the IPS think tank, is you've been calling it out in advance and with specificity about the actors, the writers, the directors associated with these particular things. So with the Machete example, it's significant because it has Robert De Niro, right, who played Franklin Murray in Joker, who gets shot in the face, right? So it's like these are not random connections. and we're calling it out in advance because, as far as I can remember, you mentioned the Space Needle stuff in September or August, and you've been doing it even longer. But when I joined, I saw it was like you were mentioning in September, October of 2024, and now suddenly, in the spring summer of 2025, we have Final Destination coming out, which begins with the destruction of the Space Needle.
Yes, exactly. And we're talking about a franchise with built-in 9/11 predictive programming, which, again, just like we notice meta scripters, same directors have their hands in things. If a movie franchise has been used as government propaganda to reinforce a psyop, it's always going to do that. They're going to be using um, the same type of strategy, consistently. And it's even down to the actors. So one of the main actors in Final Destination Bloodlines was the guy with all the piercings on himself. And I noted, wait a minute, he was one of the characters in the 100. So there's another reference, the century, the 100. And in the 100, there is the space station that has its explosion, season 1, episode 13. So the 113 space station explosion, but the same actor. And that's another one of the consistent themes here is now you have the association of the fall of the Tower of Babel, the destruction of the space station, with this character who's now associated with the destruction of the Space Needle. Anyway, the actors, the directors, the franchises, yeah, these are all complicit in propaganda.
And I've also thought, just from a pure treating the United States as a world stage, as like the center of the Coliseum of the world stage. If you think about it, the Twin Towers is East Coast, New York City, now the One World Trade Center. Seattle Space Needle is far West Coast as you can go. And I recall looking on Google Maps, JL had mentioned this as well. If you type in driving, like how long would it take to drive from New York City to Seattle? It's approximately 42 hours. So it's like you got this big, coast to coast destruction of the Tower of Babel. Total, like, it wouldn't make sense for it to only be limited to that little southern section of New York State. Now it's on the other side of the country, coast to coast destruction caused by this new world we're entering into.
Yes. Well, these towers that we're talking about, these events, these are all connected. We got movies, we have the architecture, the locations, all these different things are telling a bigger story, which is called history. And I think that's ultimately what we're pointing out here is that our history is prefabricated, acted out on the world stage, and those who write it control the present and the future and the past because they have given us collectively a sort of a myopic view that represents their interests. And it's a very effective operation, whatever you want to call this religion that they've imposed under the guise of media, but it's not really news reportage. It's information propaganda. But yeah, we've been looking at this propaganda field correctly for some time. And the big gestalt, the big picture is there is a historic event of the fall of Rome, which has been predicted in that movie that we've been talking about quite a bit, the Megalopolis. And this Megalopolis story also has the story of Trump, the head wound, and the big disaster. But they couldn't just do Ground Zero again with the One World Trade Tower. But they could do the Space Needle, which is the same symbol. And I've done symbol analysis to show that the One World Trade Tower and the Space Needle are synonymous. These are the same thing. So it wouldn't make sense for them to do 9/11 again in the same place, but the same meaning is implied if they take out the Space Needle. So why the Space Needle? Well, because it represents the same thing as the Twins, as the Titanic. It's the fall of the West.
Yeah, and the fall of the West, I tell everyone, do look it up on archive.org. James Shelby Downward's essay, King Kill 33, even though he did believe that JFK died in Dealey Plaza, that's not so important as much as the uh, symbolism and overall narrative structure he talks about in that paper. It's amazing. It came out in the 80s, and yet it still holds up, amazingly well. And he did, yeah, the fall of the West or the fall of Rome is just been a narrative that's been out there for decades. Now for almost 40 years. I mean, at least from when his paper was written, and we're seeing it play out on a microcosm with the the social justice battles that are happening in the midst of people who take sides, left or right, or that's happening in the social media angle. But we're going to also see it play out on large scale psyops that involve the attention of the whole nation. They all complement each other to contribute to this fall of the West narrative.
Well, if you recall the opening scene for Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis, there's a couple of things here, but the opening scene was the narrator talking about how empires fall, how historic events happen, but it emphasizes that an empire doesn't just disappear in a day, that it takes place over a period of time. And what I think this movie was showing here is, of course, the fall of Rome, make Rome great again, but it was like Trump's America bringing it down. But this is what we're looking at when it comes to the big Psy War and how they're writing history. Yeah, they're making mass change over a series of psyops over several subsequent generations, but they're all interrelated. And that's what's intriguing about it is you look at the relationship between these different psychological operations. Well, it's because they all exist in the same fictional universe. And our history is written in advance. That much is undeniable. They're not making it up as they go. And what we're looking at by looking back is we're looking at clear evidence here that they're steering our history with fake news, and our worldview is being informed by entertainment propaganda that makes the fake news go down easier. And this is their system.
Yeah, and the notion of time control seems very sci-fi and crazy and out there, but that isn't what we're talking about when we talk about time control. We're talking about, the control of history by the present, the past, the future. And if your eye is married to this false perception, this false world stage view of reality, they do control time because your perception of what's happening in Seattle, what's happening in New York City, what happened 30 years ago, 50 years ago and stuff, it's in their domain. And if they control that, they can control the time parameters of that domain as well. They can change facts in the past or currently right in front of us. They can, what's it called, support the change of these facts with entertainment media, with talking heads who all repeat the same talking point. And yeah, if a lie is told enough, it becomes true in their fake world, not in objective reality, but in their fake world, something can become true if they keep saying it enough.
Yeah, lie world is the term that I like to use here because it seems like the infrastructure that holds this together are these accepted lies, these beliefs that are just, I guess, incontestable. You can't argue against them. But what we're pointing out here is, I think, cutting edge because conspiracy theorists are caught up in all the little stories that have been written for them, and they haven't figured out the meaning of the fakery. And even though they notice some fake news, they still process it as partisan. Like, oh, they're using this fake news to win this election or to influence us. No, it's actually bigger than that. The fake news every day is a page in a history book. And as long as you've been paying attention, you've seen fake news every day. And the fake news that doesn't get challenged or doesn't get uprooted forms the basis, the backdrop for other news to build on top of. That's why you're always having these fake shooters referencing other shooters. But the end result of it is we have accrued fake news looking back as far as we can see, mixing with the real stuff but dominating it. So anybody who thinks that they're objective or they know what's going on and they're not including in their perspective media fakery are deluding themselves. And that's why I look at Trutherville with disdain because they're deluded. They're soaked in propaganda and they're even more clueless than the normies who just simply don't pay attention.
And it's important to understand the motivation for doing that. It's kind of like a clean uh, upheaval of the current system if it's all done in our minds. I had a really good way to explain this to friends and family and others. It's like you realize if our elite really wanted to just completely destroy society and rebuild it in their image, why would they want to like kill all these people and destroy all the architecture that's already there? Wouldn't it be a lot better to do it through lies, right? And that's basically what they've done and what we're headed towards this future upheaval. It's like if they can just make everyone think that the West has collapsed and now it needs a new direction, they can do that without blood or tears. I mean, the tears and the blood will be coming from people who are so affected by it, but not in the actual events themselves. And these big fake news events that we've talked about, they're like the modern miracles of the invisible religion. The invisible religion is based upon these huge, like whopper lies, uh, tragedies where thousands are killed. You know, you see explosions on in the news footage and stuff. Yeah, those are like basically, myths or modern day fake miracles for this invisible religion.
Well, they say in Saul Alinsky's book, Rules for Radicals, number 9, it says that the threat of the thing is more terrifying than the thing itself. And look at how they cry wolf all the time. It's always crying wolf. World War III, Civil War, they alternate these things. The Middle East is about to explode. Space is about to explode. They constantly alter the big threat. And I think these big threats have replaced the terror of gods. The God-fearing people behave. And I think that the media is religion, and the power elite are using this as a religion that will control even the people who are too smart for religion, or who don't. What I mean by is that they've seen past the lies of religion, and they think, okay, I'm not going to fall for this superstition. I'm too smart for this. That's dark age stuff. It's backward, and yet
Right.
they've adopted a de facto an ersatz religion. It's just under a different name, but same thing.
Right. So they were reject old superstitions for this smart screen hyperstitions that are fed unconsciously. And it is an amazing thought experiment when I always bring people back. Think of Rome. It's like when they had their paganistic view of like, oh, you're being influenced by Venus, or you're angry, Mars is influencing you, whatever. The people didn't think of it as just symbolic. They thought it was reality. And that's the same way we are like about the moon landing, about any one of these big fake news, the nuke, right? These God constructs, the nuke, an asteroid, space junk, the flood, that the new climate change flood, and all these are all like angry God constructs that if you don't obey, you are contributing to it. And it's just an amazing way to look at it, because these systems are a form of religion. And the Latin root of the word religion means religare, or to rebind. So it's this invisible religion that's binding people to the system of the world, while they themselves think they're above the old-fashioned religions, not knowing that there's a new invisible one that co-ops all the things that many, multitudes take for granted. And Lean Dion brought up something really important, that fake news is greater than real laws. Absolutely. I've been saying that forever. Like the Constitution, people are like, oh no, the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, they're going to take away our guns. You even said that before, Tim. It's like they don't need to touch the Second Amendment. They don't need to come for a gun grab if they have your minds. If they
Yeah,
have your
exactly.
minds, what's even the point?
Yeah, exactly. Why would they
They
need to
don't
take
need
your
to
guns
change.
if they've got you mentally in this controlled zone where like some will say, well, you guys are inactivists, you're not fighting, you're not ready to go to war, you're not bringing out the guillotine, so you're not a real truther. And I'm like, no, you're a victim of the mind war if you think you win this thing by fighting it. And even if you had all the people, paranoid about the guns being taken, marching down the street, what are they going to do? Because they're mental patients, and they don't understand the world outside of that padded cell in order to even take it over. I mean, you could organize a bunch of mental patients and physically overpower the orderlies, but if you set them out on the streets, they're not going to have any leverage. They don't have any cohesion. And I'm saying that you couldn't have truthers organized. There is no activism that can do anything if the people in the system are disconnected from objective reality to the extent that people are. And you can't overstate the significance of nukes being potentially fake. I say they are fake, but when you say that they're fake, it has all kinds of implications, just as believing they are real have implications. And the people who believe these are real live in a different world than those of us who don't believe they're real. And this distinction matters because you can see that they're God-fearing. They believe in something that's scary that they've never actually experienced. And here I am, an atheist to their God construct. So, of course, they don't like us because we're non believers, but the truth of it is, these beliefs have taken the place of older God constructs used to frighten people into compliance.
And we might occupy the same physical terrain or space as these people, but like on the astral or metaphysical in their mind, they are in a, I don't know, metaphysical circus, like a P.T. Barnum big circus. And the analogy I like to use is, imagine you're at a circus and you go into one of the tents with a show and you see the performers, and suddenly you have like a psychotic break where you think the show is real and you start fighting with audience members and you start, what's going to happen to you? You're going to get sent to jail. That's basically, we live in a giant like circus where if you take the show way too seriously and are like, let's go guys, let's protest, let's do something, you're going to get arrested, right? You're in a giant show, and that's really the, like, don't be worked into a shoot, don't take wrestling too seriously. That's what will happen to people who take these god constructs or these myths way too seriously. And I don't blame them because it's reinforced in every modality: social media, fictional movies, TV shows, movies, talking heads everywhere, right? This is probably the only place where people take a moment, pause, and critically analyze what is being shown all over.
Well, I used to watch this channel, No Agenda TV, and his job, his whole take on it was he's live streaming whenever a big event happens. And minute to minute, he's like, okay, the body count's 14. Okay, this report says it's 13. Oh, this is really terrible. My heart goes out to the victims. I think it's 15, 15 dead, 15 dead. Where minute by minute, he's breaking down headlines and he's reacting real time. So you see him sweating, going pale. He's going through something here. He's suffering because he's reporting on how it's like front lines reporting in a war. So he's like Infowars is the same way. These emergency broadcasts. Well, but I point out here that skepticism is about suspending judgment because you don't have enough information when the headline comes out to know what's true. So what business do you have reacting to it? So I don't react to this stuff. If there's an EMP that shuts out the power on the West Coast, my pulse isn't going up. Except maybe because this makes it exciting, for us to talk about it. But like, no, I have no fear. And that might bother some truthers who are, hyped up on red pill, which is built around paranoia. But no, I've lost all the fear.
And, I always mention their power would, if you will, are alchemical metascriptors, sorcerers who are working in the mystery schools to manufacture this massive stage play that works through our calendar system, through our, when you go down far enough, even to some YouTube streamers, their power lies in people believing them, right? So their power is derived from people believing their lies. So if more people thought the way we did, they would basically lose. That's the ultimate disarming of their power, is just being informed, studying, and withholding reactions. That's it. And they would lose all their power. But a culture of skepticism is necessary for that.
Yes, exactly. Which, again, this is not a big thing. Most people are against it. I'm always on Twitter. I'm always on X debating with people. And one of the things I notice here, what I call mind aids, is that the passive consumers of media are passive to fallacious arguments. And that's the weak spot here. The logical fallacies. Because once you believe something, especially if you're brought into it with an emotional appeal, it's really hard to pull it out, to uproot that belief. And I mean, I'm a non-believer, so I'm not bothered by it. I'm not operating on best guesses, but rather on what I mean, at this point, we're in the information age. We shouldn't be confused. We should have a level of certainty that was never possible before. And so I'm not constrained by this idea that being open-minded means having no certainty. And that's where I see a lot of truthers also going wrong, is that they're like, well, my truth is equally valid to yours. It's like, no, we're not in this field of opinions that are equally valid. And that's one of the main things that we're bringing here too, is that we're not coming from a place of belief or opinion. And that often leaves us in an area of agnosticism. And I'm comfortable saying, I don't know.
Yeah, and you said how difficult it is to bring people out of these lies because of their emotional attachment or involvement, that is how they get you. Because I've talked about this in other shows, the science of crystallizing lies is about generating these emotional reactions. And rest assured, the emotional reactions of your friends, your family that do believe these myths, it's real. So their reactions are real, and that decorates a fake event. So what we're doing, we're saying like, no, actually, no one died, no one cried. This is a staged event, drills, all this investment went into it, all this predictive programming. People, it's too much for them to handle because they had an emotional reaction when they first saw it, and they see all of their close friends also have an emotional reaction. That's what gives it legitimacy. And I've noticed narcissists benefit from this the most. They will often say just a flippant, outrageous lie to generate a reaction out of their target. And when their target rightfully gets upset about an absurd lie they just said, they then go, oh, why are they reacting like that? So they have a real, genuine reaction to an absurd lie, and that somehow, in the narcissist's mind and in the audience mind, gives legitimacy to that lie. So the bigger the reaction, the more legitimate the lie is.
Yes, and the television, rather the media at large, it is an emotional manipulator, and you shouldn't have to emotionally manipulate people if you're trying to show them the truth. The truth is self-evident, and that's the first red flag for me that it's a lie in some way. But this is a world of subjectivity, and objectivity doesn't really exist. I've often pointed out the objectivists always filtered their worldview through the TV, through broadcast media and print, which is never objective, always bent by fake history. So we're in a very unique place here, but I'm happy moving forward in this environment. I'm not worried about the fact that most people don't get it. It doesn't bother me. I'm not on a crusade to save them from their overreactions, but I'm not going to be held back by other people's sensibilities because they are essentially church ladies. I call them corpse clutchers. Like, instead of clutching pearls, they're the ones who walk around with theatrical blood on their hands, acting like it's a tragedy. And I'm like, look, that's you can carry that burden if you choose.
It's kind of grotesque. They have like a necklace of different body parts that they're like, oh no, that's what they're clutching instead of pearls.
Yeah, like running around
Yeah,
with rubber dead kids, and one of the best examples of this was when Alex Stain went to Uvalde, and he's out there fake crying in front of a pile of teddy bears and crosses in front of the school, just complete crisis acting. And that when I say when somebody's like mad at me for saying something's fake, I'm like, well, that person is a crisis actor, and they're not even getting paid for it.
yeah, and that's the worst thing is that how people give these crisis actors the benefit of the doubt and not a friend that they're talking face to face. That for me is always the most, I don't know, painful thing. It's like, really, you believe Tucker Carlson, Alex Stein, all these people, you believe them more than me. Like, we're talking one-on-one. You don't know those people. Like, you don't know any of the people that you see on the screen. You never met them, but you are more willing to believe them because it's from an authoritative media source. Everyone's reacting to it, so it has to be real. But hey, their eyes, they've married. Their eyes are married to this world, much like Iris at the top of the Space Needle with I got married to this new perception that is going to be filtered through the screen. But yeah, I don't want to take up. This is probably the longest we talked, so I'll let you continue with your show. And,
Okay, cool.
Thanks for taking my
Yeah,
call.
thanks for the call. And yeah, people are basically wearing internalized AVR headsets, internalized their Truman shows. Well, have a great evening. Thanks for the call, and thanks for watching Final Destination.
Bye.
I know the movies are often terrible, but we have to go through them. And okay, Final Destination Bloodlines just came out. And something else I meant to mention on that Mickey 17, the Luigi-like character who shoots at the Trump character is a twin. Mickey 17 and Mickey 18. What does that mean? Well, the twin thing stood out to me because we've been talking about the prevalence of twins in these various narratives. In this case, I'm not quite sure, but again, the twin thing, it can't be really separated from the Trump. The Trump represented as twins, the Twin Towers. There's all kinds of weird twin stuff going on. So for that to be another element there stands out. Also, when I went to see the movie, The trailer before it was for the Fantastic Four. And in the Fantastic Four, there's an explosion in the sky above a city. People looking up, something falls from space, and the Earth goes into a mass power outage. And you do see a Space Needle like restaurant in several shots. So, Fantastic Four trailer before Final Destination reiterated a lot of the stuff that we've been pointing out. We talked about the Space Needle. Now, again, like I said earlier, I didn't know this until today. I just did a quick news search on the Space Needle, and they opened up this thing called the Skyliner. Space Needle to unveil North America's first Skyliner, a double-deck, floor-to-ceiling glass elevator that completely transforms the trip. So they did a redesign on the elevator that opens tomorrow. Well, today now. 23rd. Anyway, what are the odds? So now again, Skyliner unveiling new elevator at the Space Needle. Now let's look at Final Destination Bloodlines on Wiki. This is just an example of how the programming overlaps. And we shouldn't be able to discern this. The fact that we're able to predict the occurrences of such things with regularity just really underlines that we have identified what's actually happening. So let's look at the plot here. 1969, Iris and her fiance Paul attend the opening ceremony of Skyview, a high-rise restaurant tower. So again, Skyview, Skyline, opening ceremony, overlapping. And the cover itself has, of course, the exploding Space Needle. As we're getting, this is, again, concurrent programming. You're watching a movie about the opening of the Space Needle, and it blows up. And now we're watching in real life, today, the Century Project, which I've said since 2019, that the Century Project, the $100 million, is all financing the upcoming PSYOP at the Space Needle. Well, this opening ceremony is the first milestone that we're seeing of where the $100 million went. So what do you call that? This overlapping of entertainment and news and real life and psyops is the big story here. And what we're doing here is we're analyzing historic events, like the major transformative historic events as they're happening, as they're about to happen, and they're being foreshadowed in history itself. It's a remarkable system that they have. We've correctly identified it. It's not really an oversimplification to say it's all just a movie. We're not saying it's all fake, but we live on the world stage, and it's more than just a metaphor. The world stage is, in fact, like the political horseshoe theory is no longer just a theory. We're looking at the structure, the infrastructure of what I call the live world order. But anyway, this has been interesting. I'll bring some pictures tomorrow of Mickey 17, some of the screen caps, so you can see what I'm talking about. A Trump-based character, the scratch on his cheek after a failed assassination attempt, and then at the end, this culmination scene with what appears to be nukes blowing up. All of it eerily coinciding with the real event. Again, is the director psychic? How did the director make a scene that not only has the Luigi character built into it, and Luigi didn't happen until after the Trump event, but it has the Trump character demanding the media continue to cover him after he dodges a bullet? Again, that's beyond prescient. We're looking at systemic structural fakery. And I don't think there's a better think tank doing exactly, in fact, this is the only one doing what we're doing here. So I look forward to the destruction of this iconic monument, the Space Needle in Seattle. I hope it happens according to the movies, because we're looking here, we've been looking at this for some time, but we're looking at likely one of the clearer examples that might illustrate exactly what we're talking about day by day. And this could be something that would get a few people to look at our analysis as more than just conspiracy conjecture, which it's not. But it's, again, we're talking about a paradigm shift. It's a pretty big paradigm shift to go from the media is lying on behalf of the bad people that run the world. It's a paradigm shift to the media is completely a reality TV show on behalf of some cabal or some worldview monopoly. And I think it's unsatisfactory for some because we can't point to a who did it, who's behind it. We can't point to this group or this individual because that would suggest that if you could just get rid of that, everything would be fine. And no, I don't think it works that way. Like, in other words, you can't stop it. The new world order isn't coming. It's already been here. It's the old world order. And I think when you tell people that resistance is futile, they feel like we're trying to be, I don't know, like we're demoralized or something. But no, resistance is futile, FYI. At least resistance in the sense of throwing rocks at cops and shouting in the street. The only kind of resistance that means anything is the intellectual revolt against lies and the conscientious objection when it comes to being dragged into these events. Do you want to participate in the Psy-War? That's the only meaningful resistance. Participation in it is complicity. So, in other words, if you're taking sides in the Psy-War, you lose your moral high ground. So don't let people look down on you for not being agitated and scared and worried. Space Chimp says, remember the scene in Bloodlines where the girl was using index cards like JL? Yes, exactly. Birth dates, death dates, the big pattern, the prophecy about the Space Needle. I mean, Jurassic Liars was correct that it's a terrible movie. But when we look at these things, we're looking for the nuance. The tower's opening date, 1968. And again, the fact that the opening scene is the opening of the Space Needle, where they're first ones on the elevator, the fact that that corresponds to the Space Needle in real life, opening the Skyliner tomorrow, we couldn't have predicted that. But that was already going to happen. So again, we're looking at the purposeful synchronization between a psyop that's about to happen and the movies that are building up content in the popular imagination so that when a thing happens, they get the full experience. Leo Friend says the penny with the assassinated Lincoln was almost a character throughout the film, being featured in the credits. Yeah, even the end credits was just the penny rolling around on these different deaths connected by, threads on like a big conspiracy mind map. But I think the movie's profound just in the fact that it correlates these two events, 9/11, the future Seattle event, 1968. It hits all these. It's just really insane. Evolvement says full moon in Sagittarius 6/11. Well, the movie opens up with that song Bad Moon Rising, which didn't even come out until 1969. But the movie opening 1968, they have Bad Moon Rising playing. And then it goes into Ring of Fire. The songs all reinforce the bigger picture. But that's good to know. Full moon in Sagittarius. Wonder what that could mean. All right, thanks everyone for joining. We'll start earlier tomorrow. I had some minor tech difficulties with OBS, but we switched over to Streamlabs open broadcasting software, and for some reason it's working better. So thanks for the call, comments, and we'll see you all tomorrow. I'll have some updates about the PSYOP cards, which I'm ordering as soon as I get home.
Dream, I ain't got time.